Welcome to the DFO Fantasy Show Team Preview Series. I'm Managing Fantasy Editor of Daily Faceoff.com, Brock Seguin, and today we will be covering the Chicago Blackhawks. In 2024-25, the Blackhawks had the second worst record in the NHL, failing to reach 30 wins for the fifth consecutive season. Entering 25-26, not much is expected to change according to the sportsbooks. Chicago is projected to finish with the worst record in hockey at 69 points, which would actually be their best season since 2020. Last year, they had a top 10 power play, but were a bottom 10 team at 5v5. Overall, their offense ranked 26, and they're probably not going to score many more goals this season. Certainly not going to be a haven for fantasy production. They hired head coach Jeff Blashill this summer, but during his tenure in Detroit, the Red Wings had the third worst points percentage in the NHL and were the lowest scoring team in the league when he was there from 2016 to 2022. As far as fantasy assets go, all eyes will be on Connor Bedard this season. Bedard ended up being a fantasy bust last season, compiling just 67 points with 23 goals and 44 assists in 82 games as a late fourth, early fifth round pick. However, he does look like a strong bounce back candidate this season. When you look at his 5v5 play, he had just 3 secondary assists, something that should normalize itself this season even on a bad offense. He also saw a massive drop in IPP from 91.9% to 68.6%. That's more normalizing an unsustainable rate than regression, but if he can get back somewhere in the 75% range this year, he'll be in for a nice bounce back. The key factor for Bedard will be his shot volume. He averaged 9.2 shots on goal per 60 in his rookie year and just 7.03 shots per 60 last year. If his shot volume and IPP climb closer to his rookie year, it's conceivable that Bedard will be a 30-plus goal, 50-plus assist player in 25-26. The problem, however, is he's still going in the fifth round this season around other 30-goal, 50-assist players. So it feels like you're kind of drafting Bedard at his ceiling when players like Martin Necas and Mark Scheifele are going around the same ADP and have a much better shot of reaching those marks. The Daily Faceoff consensus rankings view Bedard as more of a 6th-round pick than a 5th-round pick. The only other forwards worth considering with a late-round pick are Frank Nazar and Ryan Donato. Donato is an obvious regression candidate, having blown away his career high with a 17% shooting percentage last year. And when you pile that on top of a 14.1 on-ice shooting percentage and an 85.4 IPP, there are red flags everywhere with Donato. Luckily, the fantasy community is obviously aware of this, which is why he's dropping to the 16th round in drafts. He'll probably end up being back on the fantasy hockey waiver wire before long, but he's a name worth monitoring because we obviously know that he can get super hot. After all, he finished with 40 points, 20 goals, 20 assists in his final 41 games last season. Nazar, on the other hand, was the 13th overall pick in 2022 and has breakout potential in his first full season in the NHL. He was a great player in the AHL last season, posting 24 points in 21 games. That's an NHLE of 20 goals and 24 assists. Now, that's nearly identical to the pace that he was on during his 53 games with the Blackhawks, but it was his finish to 2025 that showed off his true breakout potential this year. In his final 11 games, he averaged 18 minutes and 33 seconds time on ice per game and racked up 6 goals, 4 assists during that time. The playing time and the shot volume were extremely encouraging. He was on pace for 216 shots per 82 games, a rate that could allow him to be a 30-goal scorer this season. He has legit 30-30 upside this year and cost you absolutely nothing on draft day. On the blue line, there are a lot of young options, but Sam Rinzel is the only one that I'm targeting in fantasy this year and the Blackhawks defenseman that I'm the highest on. In 9 games with the Blackhawks last season, he had 5 assists, 22 shots on goal, 12 hits, while averaging 23 minutes and 22 seconds time on ice per game. The University of Minnesota product has great sneaky upside as your number 4 fantasy defenseman that could climb up the depth chart throughout the season. Between the pipes, Spencer Knight is going undrafted in fantasy. I think he could make for a decent number 3 fantasy goalie with your last pick in the draft, but you'll have to be extremely choosy with your matchups, which is why he'll probably end up becoming more of a season-long streaming target. But he did have some outstanding games after the trade to Chicago last year, and after a full offseason, he could be a true workhorse with the Blackhawks this year, but he still only projects for 22 wins. Fantasy goalies, after all, are more of a product of the team in front of them, and Knight is in a very difficult situation and not one that I'm overly excited to be targeting. I am now joined by Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times. Ben, thanks so much for joining me.
Yep, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. We got the hockey season coming up quick, but before we get into the deep stuff here for the fantasy hockey season, I just want to know, who is your breakout candidate from the Chicago Blackhawks this season?
Well, the fact that he just signed a 7-year extension last week maybe gives it away, but I think it's got to be Frank Nazar. You look at his raw point totals. He had 23 points in 53 games last year, so doesn't really jump off the page. But just in terms of the talent he has and his age and the way he improved throughout last season, I think the expectations are really high for him this year. He had 8 points in his last 9 games. Actually, I think it's 9 points in his last 8 games in April to finish the year. And then he had 12 points in 10 games in the World Championships to help the USA win the gold medal. He outproduced Tage Thompson and Clayton Keller on that team. And if you look even deeper, I mean, he was probably the Hawks' biggest offensive driver throughout the second half of the season, even though he wasn't finishing a lot of those chances until April. From March 13th on, he had 53 individual scoring chances, which is 13 more than anyone else on the Hawks, and I think 25th in the league. So he was really doing a lot last year that in Chicago we were seeing, and maybe just wasn't getting a lot of attention league-wide because it was such a poor team, and he wasn't putting up those gaudy totals. But I think this year he has a real chance to really push that and go for 50 points or so. I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. He's kind of penciled in as the second-line center behind Connor Bedard right now, and my best guess is that maybe we'll see guys like Teuvo Teravainen and Tyler Bertuzzi on his wings. He played with them a good amount towards the end of last year, so definitely a guy to keep an eye on.
He finished the season, like you said, on a nice hot streak, playing over 17 minutes a night. Is that kind of where you pencil him in, 17, 18 minutes a night this year?
Yeah, most likely. Maybe even a minute or two higher than that. He plays in the power play and he plays in the penalty kill, so he's getting extra time from that. He was one of the Hawks' best penalty killers last year and found his groove on the power play, especially late in the year. And then on even strength, I think he'll be getting those second line minutes. I think it's even possible we could see him with Bedard from time to time if the team is trying to mix things up. And both of them kind of struggle a little bit on faceoff, so that's another thing that they have to keep in mind. But yeah, I think he'll be in line for a pretty big role.
You spoke about Connor Bedard. What can we expect from him in year 3? Can last year simply be chalked up to a bit of a sophomore slump? Obviously, the team around him wasn't great. He really just didn't take that expected step forward that everyone was expecting in year 2. Can we expect him to get back to, potentially being a 30-goal point per game guy this season in year 3?
Well, I think that's certainly possible and certainly what he's hoping for. It's hard to say, with certainty, but I know he's put in a lot of work this summer to try to get back on track. He talked about how maybe, even though he had the right intentions in his previous summers, he maybe just didn't go about it in the right way in terms of his training. So I think he's changed some things up with that. His speed numbers decreased last year, which was a little odd. So I think that's been a big focus of his, is to increase his speed and get that back on where it was his rookie year. And also creating more separation in the offensive zone. That's a big thing that new coach Jeff Blashill has talked to him and about already. And then he's also changed his stick flex up from a 70 to a 75. That's still really whippy by NHL standards, but should help him a little bit with puck battles and maintaining possession when he's getting checked. So those are little adjustments he's made, but it'll really come down to him just showing it on the ice. Certainly, as you get older, he's now going to be 20 years old. You get more experience. You learn what works and what doesn't at this level. And that's been a big thing for him, is figuring out how to adjust after he was basically able to do everything he wanted in the WHL. So if he can stay healthy, I think it's definitely a reasonable expectation for him to be a point per game. It's still very unclear who his wingers are going to be. If it's not Teravainen and Bertuzzi, new addition Andrei Burakovsky, if he can kind of rediscover his old form, is a possibility there. And then Ryan Donato as well. And we even saw Ilya Mikheyev up with him a little bit, just bringing some speed. But obviously these aren't really first-line caliber wingers on a lot of teams. So that's still going to be, a bit of a hindrance on him, that he is not going to have the greatest support. But as he gets older, I think it's reasonable to expect that he would take a big step forward.
And yeah, finished the season strong last year too, right? 15 points, 6 goals, 9 assists in his last 15 games. That was a 33-goal, 82-point pace. So shown he can do it in small stretches, see if he can put it together for a full season. You just mentioned Ryan Donato. Obviously just an insane year last year. Was basically the best fantasy pickup around. Now that he's gotten paid, what do you expect from him this year? Is last year just kind of that classic contract year where he explodes, try to get the money, or can he be a 30-goal guy again? Like, the shooting percentage looks largely unsustainable, but he was on a 40-40 pace in the second half of the season, so even a little bit of regression, and he could still possibly be a 30-goal guy. What are your thoughts now that he's been paid?
Yeah, I'm not sure you can reasonably count on him being 30 goals again, but I think certainly 20 is a reasonable expectation. I mean, he's always had the work ethic, and he's always kind of had a sneaky finishing skill. Like even his first season in Chicago, the year before last, he did get to the net a lot and was able to put in some dirty goals around there, which is a bit of a lacking thing on this team in general. And there is reason to believe that last year was a new form of him, not just a fluke, and that he really worked on his skating last summer. That had previously been kind of a big weakness of his, that he was one of the slower skaters in the league, and he was basically able to get up to league average in that category. Like, he did take a very substantial step forward. I know he was planning to do more of that this summer. He's based in Boston this summer, but he goes down to Florida for that. And I think there's reason to believe that if he can maintain that speed, that he will be able to still be kind of a higher caliber player that he showed last year than sort of the journeyman bottom six guy that he had previously been. So maybe 30 and 30 isn't likely again, but I think 20 and 20 is definitely possible, especially if he sticks on the first line with Bedard and keeps getting those top power play minutes.
Yeah, he obviously earned the trust of the coaching staff last year. Going to have to do it with a new coaching staff this year. But I mean, after the Four Nations faceoff, he was playing nearly 20 minutes a night, which is obviously a drastic increase from what we'd seen him previously do in his career. Let's talk about the blue line a little bit. There are a lot of talented young defensemen in Chicago, but who do you expect to be the best point producer among that group? I think Sam Renzel last year was a guy that came up from the NCAA and looked really, really comfortable right away. Is it him? Is it somebody else? Who do you think?
Yeah, I think Renzel is probably the safest bet to be the top defensive point producer. He was extremely impressive to the fact that even though it was only a 9-game sample size, he's pretty much been penciled in by everybody, myself included, on the first pairing this year. That's how good he looked. He had 4 assists, I think, and he could have easily had more. He hit some posts. He's very comfortable moving the puck. There's some impressive highlights where he gathers the puck in the defensive zone and basically leads the breakout entirely by himself. He's just that smooth of a skater and has that good of vision. And I think he's in line to have a huge role in this team. I mean, I could see him playing 23, 24 minutes if all goes well. That's what he was doing immediately when he came in from college last spring. And I think also he's probably the most likely bet to get the top power play quarterback role too. With Seth Jones gone, he was doing some of that in the spring. It was kind of a rotation with him, with Alex Vlasic, with Artem Levshinov. Levshinov and Kevin Korchinski are both kind of projected as future power play guys, but I think there's a decent chance that both of them, or at least one of them, starts the year in the AHL. Levshinov just has a long way to go in terms of his decision making and his defensive play, and Korchinski also defensively and more building up strength. So they still have a bit more development to do, whereas Renzel is a little bit more polished at this point. Certainly he's not going to be perfect. I think over an 82-game sample, we're going to see a little bit more warts just inevitably than we saw in 9 games. But I think he's the most likely bet to be that power play quarterback, and he should be getting first pairing minutes at 5-on-5. So another guy, I mean, if you're looking for breakout candidates, he's definitely in that category as well.
I think the thing that stuck out the most with Renzel was averaged over 5.6 shot attempts per game, got over 2.5 shots per game on the net. So not a player that was afraid to shoot the puck at all, playing massive minutes. So when you get that many pucks towards the net, good things are going to happen for sure. Final question here for you, Ben, is between the pipes. Do you have any insight on the Blackhawks' plans for Spencer Knight this season? Is he a goalie that they plan to give, say, 55 plus starts this season at a true workhorse that we don't really see much of anymore in the NHL? He was on that pace after the trade last year. Do you see him being kind of a 55-60 start guy this year?
I think at least 50, 55 definitely reasonable too. They definitely see him as their probable franchise goalie long term. He's up for a contract extension, and I think that's going to be a big topic. Bedard as well, probably even bigger topic, but they definitely are ready to commit to him long term. I know that he's been working this summer and preparing for that big workload of 55 starts or so. Obviously not something he ever experienced in Florida working behind Bobrovsky, so he's been working on his stamina and conditioning to prepare himself for that workload. He said he really enjoyed it in the spring. I think he started 15 of the Hawks' last 22 games, and kind of when you're playing every other night like that, he said he was able to just think less and not dwell on each start as much. So he sounds prepared for that kind of workload. And Arvid Soderblom obviously was re-signed for 2 years, and he'll be the backup. But I think the team sees him as more of a permanent backup. I don't know if they think that he's going to challenge Knight for that starting role. So if his health holds up, I think that should be a fair expectation. And really, I mean, if he's probably the biggest X factor on this team. Like if he can take a step and be an above average, strong NHL starting goalie, that would make a huge difference in helping the Hawks maybe take a step above expectations, maybe get a little bit out of the basement of the league, because he has the talent to do it. I mean, we saw some games where he looked unstoppable. And we also saw some games where he was a little bit vulnerable, particularly up high. So if he can kind of, round out his weaknesses and become one of those, top young goalies in the league, I think that could help the team a lot. And so they've invested a lot and they're counting a lot on him. And it would definitely be, a fair expectation that he'll be in the net most of the time.
Yeah, some of those games, as you mentioned, just lights out, some struggles, but I think that's going to come with playing behind a team that struggled as much defensively as Chicago did. Still, according to hockeyreference.com, 53% of his starts with the Blackhawks were quality starts. So definitely a strong goalie that could build on what he did last year. Thank you so much for your time, Ben, and good luck with all of the Blackhawks and NHL games to cover this season.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Hey, hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.